So this article was brought to my attention actually by Vaping Minuteman. Of course, I don't know if he saw this particular article or he learned it from somewhere else, but he had spoken about it on one of his shows, and I so happened to come across this once a week. I'll just go through a whole bunch of news articles in regards to vaping, and this particular thing popped up. So I'm going to read from it, and then I'm going to speak to it. So it comes off of vaporvoicemagazine.com. It's April 4th, 2018. Caption reads, FDA says OTC or over-the-counter, a vapor possibility. The Commissioner of the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, Scott Gottlieb, has said that the agency is considering whether it could bring electronic cigarettes into the over-the-counter regulatory pathway. According to a CNBC report relayed by the TMA. Gottlieb said the OTC pathway would give the agency more tools to look at both safety and benefit, study whether or not an e-cigarette promoted smoking cessation, and study toxicity and the way it affects the lung. This move was said to be part of the sweeping plan to overhaul tobacco regulation that the commissioner announced in July. Gottlieb said, at the very time I'm trying to take nicotine out of combustible tobacco, I don't want to be sweeping the market of products that provide an alternative to smokers who want to get access to nicotine. The idea flows from the FDA's continuum of risk policy that recognizes that conventional cigarettes are the most harmful and other nicotine products are potentially less risky. So, it's a very good article, and this is a possibility. It would fall under the new drug application, which is very similar to the pre-market tobacco application process, the PMTA. The good thing about this, though, if he does this, of course, in order for him to go down this path, guess what he has to do? He has to do a notice of proposed rulemaking. Now, that takes another year or two for him to do that, if he decides to go down that route. Of course, the Secretary of the Health and Human Services Department would have to okay this because he has the deeming clause power. The FDA Commissioner, Scott Gottlieb, nor does the Director of the Center for Tobacco Products, Mitch Zeller, have the power to do what they could possibly do here. Only the Secretary of the Health and Human Services Department, which I'm sure Scott Gottlieb, FDA Commissioner, says this would be best. According to the continuum of risk policy, I'm sure the Secretary would give it a green light. The good thing about this, actually the very good thing about all this, is that we would not have to deal with the grandfather date, the predicate date, any longer. If vapor products or considered or regulated as drugs, the Tobacco Control Act of 2009 no longer affects us. We are out of that complete Tobacco Control Act. And therefore, we are under the Federal Food and Drug Cosmetic Act. Now, don't get me wrong, it's a very difficult process to get products approved by the FDA, either to have a prescription drug, let alone an over-the-counter drug. Even that has to be approved by the FDA. You still have to get an FDA marketing order to put it on the market. But the two good things about it that I see is the predicate date goes away. The February 15, 2007 date disappears. It disappears because the February 15, 2007 is only in the Tobacco Control Act. And if we're no longer regulated by the Tobacco Control Act of 2009 and the Family Smoking Prevention Tobacco Control Act of 2009, then therefore we are not affected by the predicate date to February 15, 2007. So that's good. And therefore, February 15, 2007 doesn't affect vaping products or the vaping industry or the vaping community. August 8th, 2016 goes away as well. And of course, the August 8th of 2022 disappears, as well as the August 8th of 2018, the official date, which is in the FDA final rule, as well as the Tobacco Control Act of 2009. So all those dates just literally disappear because they do not affect vapor products. If vapor products fall under Federal Food and Drug Cosmetic Act. Now, you have to understand, Tobacco Control Act and the FDA final rule is both governed by the Federal Food and Cosmetic Act. But the Tobacco Control Act has nothing to do with drugs, and the FDA final rule has nothing to do with drugs. And if Gottlieb decides to place vaping products under the category of drugs, then therefore the Tobacco Control Act and FDA final rule does not affect us. That's the one good thing. The other good thing is that we are protected. If anyone knows the FDA, they love Big Pharma. Big Pharma can do no wrong. Though there are times that they do take them to court. They do remove products from the marketplace. But overall, the FDA looks upon Big Pharma or drugs with a rather good light, or with a rather a good opinion than they do with tobacco. So therefore, we would not be governed by tobacco, and therefore the FDA will look upon vaping products as something that's good. That is, if you can get approved, of course. You have to go through a whole new drug application. Now, of course, they also have this thing that even though the new drug application is very expensive and very complex, you can still go through a substantial equivalence process as well. Of course, once again, there isn't really anything on the market that's substantially equivalent to what we have. But then again, the way the Federal Food and Cosmetic Act reads is that it only governs like Big Pharma as far as like nicotine patches, lozenges, pills, inhalators, injectors, gums, patches, all that other stuff. And they have no predicate date. So either you can get it through the entire new drug application process or you don't. Now, they do have the substantial equivalence. I mean, like, for instance, if you want to, like Bayer aspirin, a pick on that, perfect example. Bayer aspirin, there are a lot of generic Bayer aspirins out there, or there are a lot of generic aspirins out there. The Bayer aspirin itself, the name brand, the original Bayer aspirin, is the substantial equivalent. That's that. In other words, the generic drugs go through a substantial equivalence process because they very much are like, substantially are like, the original Bayer aspirin. Now, which was approved by the FDA many decades ago. We don't have that. So even though they have the substantial equivalence process, it won't affect vaping products because, well, we don't have anything approved by the FDA that substantially is equivalent or substantially similar to the vaping products that we have on the market now. So, but nevertheless, we can still go through the new drug application, and there's a company called Fontem Ventures. That's FONTEM Ventures, VENTURES. They had just taken a stake in Cosmic Fog, and so as time goes by, it's going to wind up being more like that, more and more. I believe it was Cosmic Fog or Cutwood. I can't remember which one. I think it's Cosmic Fog. Yes, cosmic fog. So they have a stake in cosmic fog, and they have a lot of money. They have a lot of money, a lot of capital, and I think they're out of the Netherlands. And so they'll pump a lot of money into cosmic fog in case they go down the route of Gottlieb saying, okay, gives the green light that vapor products will fall under the Food, Drug, Cosmetic Act. Then a company like Phantom Ventures, which is a huge, huge company, can put the monies behind a cosmic fog and push them through a new drug application. And once you get some e-liquid through that new drug application, then we'll have a substantial equivalence e-liquid. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. The two main things that really, which is really great if Gottlieb would do this, is that the grandfather date goes away. That doesn't affect us anymore, the predicate date. And that we are looked upon more with a better light, or I should say in a better light, than we are if we're classified in the tobacco section. To be classified as tobacco as opposed to a drug. And, it's funny. I'll tell you something. I spoke about this over a year ago on my old FDA Final Rule channel. I spoke about how, and I even said that, it probably would be a good idea for vapor products to go down that route and be protected by the drug protections, or be considered a drug. And there were a lot of people, a lot of the comments were like, "Oh, you out of your mind? Oh, what is the matter with you? What is the matter? You anti-vaping and all, and all this crap went on." And then now, a little over a year later, well, it might be a very good idea after all. And I mean, I've always considered it a good idea. And maybe you guys out there, whoever watches this video or listens to this video, will agree that this is a better, I mean, the way we are right now, the PMTA and the NDA is the same thing. It really is. In fact, the pre-market tobacco application process is based on the new drug application. In fact, in the Nickel Pure Labs Right to Be Smoke-Free Coalition, they spoke about that time and time again in the United States District Court before, of course, they lost their case on the lower court, but it's up on appeal now. But still, they talked about that time and time and time again, how the new drug application process and the pre-market tobacco application process are one and the same. There's no difference. So, being as that is the case, we can't do any worse if we had the new drug application. And then the great thing about it is that grandfather date, the predicate date, disappears. We are no longer affected by the FDA Final Rule or by the Tobacco Control Act. And then I think we'd be a much better place. And not only that, and what's really great about this, when you really put the pieces together as to what's going on here with Gottlieb, is being that the dates go away. That is, the August 8th, 2016 goes away. The February 15th, 2007 goes away. The August 8th of 2018 goes away, which is the official date in the Tobacco Control Act and FDA Final Rule, as well as the August 8th of 2022. All those dates do not affect us. Therefore, and there's nothing that says it otherwise, vaping products, unless they do another FDA Final Rule or they pick out a date out of the blue, there's nothing that says that vaping products can no longer be on the market. Once we are considered a drug, of course, you can't have vaping products on the market forever, but I'm sure it's going to give the FDA time to finally work out a way. So the process of all these submissions with the vapor products through the new drug application probably will be streamlined, maybe be different. They'll set new deadlines. Who knows? Maybe they'll set a deadline of 2030. You understand? I mean, They could have no deadlines, or they could have a deadline. They could make a new deadline up. Once again, it has to go through a whole notice of proposed rulemaking. In fact, this entire process of even having us classified as a drug has to go through a notice of proposed rulemaking, and that too takes a good year or two to do. I mean, this stuff's not going to happen overnight. But if you ask my humble opinion, when you take it all and put it all in perspective, as I've said over a year ago when I did that video on the FDA Final Rule channel, maybe I should upload that old video when I spoke about it. And that is, considering the PMTA and the new drug application are one and the same, we have nothing to lose. In fact, the only thing we have is we can gain something out of it, meaning that the grandfather date and all that crap goes away. I've always said, and I always thought, and I will continue to say, I think the best route to go is to be classified as a drug, just like Big Pharma with the nicotine patches and gums and inhalators, etc. down the line. Their particular products are a smoking cessation. Hopefully I pronounced that right. cessation. They are considered nicotine products, of course, and some are over-the-counter and some are prescription. And the same thing could happen to vaping products. They not only can be over-the-counter, but they could even be prescribed to you maybe in the future someday. I'd rather have us as drugs and be protected by the FDA because, like I said before, they look upon drugs more than anything else, more than less so. They look upon drugs as a good thing, whereas tobacco has such a bad connotation to it. And not only that, if this goes through, I mean, even Mitch Zeller, who is extremely big pharma and extremely anti-tobacco to the nth degree, especially vaping products, he's completely against it. Because you could tell, I mean, he was the legal writer on the FDA Final Rule. Even he would say to himself, or he would have to by law, regardless of what he was thinking, he would even have to say, look, now the vapor products are classified as drugs, it probably is a good thing. I'm sure Gottlieb has Mitch Zeller on a short leash anyway. And then the other little thing is this whole thing here. The FDA's continuum of risk policy. Now, that comes out of the Tobacco Control Act, but that is also in the Federal Food and Drug Cosmetic Act. And what it is you have your products, the whole list, right? You start with the combusted cigarettes, just regular traditional cigarettes, which is, as far as risk is concerned, it's really bad for you. It kills people left and right. Then you might have something like, maybe the cheap blunt cigars or cigarillos, maybe pipe tobacco, maybe roll your own tobacco, probably roll your own tobacco, definitely. Things like that. That would be like the next thing in line. The only thing maybe with the roll your own tobaccos doesn't have so many chemicals in it. Depends on how reputable and how good the tobacco is, how clean it is. That is, the leaf itself, how non-processed it is. And then as you work down the line, you come closer to then you have premium cigars, and then you have vaping products and smokeless tobacco and things of that nature. And then as you go on the continuum of risk, as you move down the ladder or across the line, I guess you could say, then you start getting into things like Big Pharma, like with their patches and gums and lozenges, as opposed to what the FDA really looks upon as the greatest thing known to mankind, is prescription-filled nicotine products like inhalators and injectors and pills and things of that nature. They're very well protected, those particular FDA marketing orders. And that's a very, as far as risk is concerned, that is on the least end of the scale Of course, some people have had problems with Chantix, I've heard. I never tried that before, but I've heard some bad stories about that. And that would be therefore not on a very good. It would not be a good risk. It would be more into the bad risk. I mean, Big Pharma, I'm not sticking up for them, but for the most part, they have drugs out there that are FDA approved that don't give you too bad of side effects that you wind up, killing yourself and getting depressed or whatever. But there are drugs out there that you can have side effects that can make you crazy in the head, So, I mean, certainly as far as the side effects themselves, I mean, there is a risk to those drugs. I mean, there's a risk to anything really. But anyway, the point is that's what a continuum of risk policy is. What the continuum of risk is from traditional cigarettes all the way to, let's say, a prescribed inhalator or prescribed injection of nicotine. They're all on the opposite ends of the scale, and then everything else falls in between. So, and that by law, by federal law, they have to follow. So, because we are not tobacco products, that is traditional cigarettes and things of that nature, we fall somewhere in the middle somewhere. The great thing is if we can get out of that middle, because we're still classified a tobacco product, and if we can move more closer to the drug aspect or even be classified as a drug, then we'll be the least risk of all the items that are on the pendulum, I guess you could say, about the pendulum swinging back and forth. So anyway, but you don't get your hopes up too high, because they still have to, Gottlieb would still have to go through a notice of proposed rulemaking. He has to propose it. He has to propose the rule. It goes into the Federal Register. Then it goes for comment period. He might even do an advance notice of proposed rulemaking. He may do that. And then he still has to go through a notice of proposed rulemaking. They have to do a notice of proposed rulemaking no matter what. By law, federal law, they have to do that. Advance notice of proposed rulemaking, they don't have to do that. That's not required by law, by federal law, for any federal agency to do. They only have to do the notice of proposed rulemaking, which can take anywhere from 6 months to 2 years, sometimes even more. So it depends, you understand? Like, for instance, like in April 2014, the notice of proposed rulemaking went into the Federal Register in regards to vaping products, premium cigars, things of that nature. And then in May of 2016, the rule was published in its final form. That is in this particular case, because it's the FDA final rule as we know it. But you have to understand, the FDA has a whole bunch of final rules. They have final rules on everything. Drugs have final rules. In fact, the EPA has the EPA final rules. But we know it as the FDA final rule because it affects us, and it's sort of understood that way, I should say. But nevertheless, so it went into the Federal Register, published, that is, the final rule in May of 2016. So it was a little over 2 years it took for them to go through that whole process of notice of proposed rulemaking. So it shows you can get anywhere from 6 months to 2 years, sometimes even a little bit more. But anyway, I don't want to let this go too long because I have one other video I want to do. I've said it over a year ago. I think that this really would be the best route to go, especially have it as over the counter. And that way you could have your vape shops, you could have retailers, you can have importers of products and things of that nature, and without having to go through all the hoops and loops and all that other crap that's contained in the FDA final rule and the Tobacco Control Act. I mean, you still have to get your product approved, so you get a marketing order from the FDA so it can be marketed or sold on the market. But I'm sure if Gottlieb is still around, he can't live forever, this guy, but if he's still around, I'm sure he can, streamline the process for vaping products, things of that nature. But you have to, the great thing about it all is all those dates go away, especially the predicate date, the February 15, 2007, no longer affects us. That is only in the Tobacco Control Act of 2009. That is not at all in the Federal Food and Drug Cosmetic Act. So anyway, this could be a good thing. I'm not putting it down at all. I think it could be very well our saving grace, so to speak, to go that route. Over-the-counter or prescription vapor products. Maybe something like a 2-mecmod would be more of a prescribed medication. More like a prescribed drug. Only for those that know how to use a 2-mecmod will be prescribed that particular device. I'm just kidding. Or maybe, I don't know. But no, 2-mecmods really have, unfortunately, and I love 2-mecmods, but unfortunately they're going to be a thing of the past. But as far as regulated mods and things of that nature, I mean, yeah, over the counter, absolutely no problem with that. So anyway, I wanted to share this with you, and I'm going to be back in a moment with another one. See you guys in a second.